The Interstellar Health Consortium maintained meticulous archives spanning many epochs. Their vast database documented physiological characteristics of countless sentient species from across the universe, meticulously categorized by durability, sensation tolerance, and recuperative abilities. Then Earthlings appeared and promptly shattered their elegant classification system. They're doing what to themselves? Senior medical observer Xylith's luminous tendrils undulated with distress as the holographic display showed an Earthling field medic applying what appeared to be an adhesive bonding agent directly onto an exposed wound. They call it instant skin, replied her assistant, consulting preliminary findings. Apparently it began as a military medical solution before becoming a commonplace household repair product. So they simply adhere themselves back together? Xylith's external respiratory membranes flushed an unhealthy yellowish hue. No sterilization. Field. No neural inhibitor. No cellular restoration matrix. According to this, sometimes they splash alcohol on it beforehand as a disinfectant. Well, that's somewhat reassuring. The report indicates they occasionally consume the same alcohol. For pain management, an uncomfortable silence fell over the observation chamber as the assembled alien medical specialists watched the continuing transmission from the Earthling battlefield. The consortium had dispatched their team when diplomatic channels opened, with Earth's various governments, standard procedure when encountering a previously unidentified spacefaring species. Medical assessment was essential for establishing appropriate quarantine protocols, biosecurity measures, and treatment guidelines. No one had prepared them for Earthlings. That one is sealing a wound with heated metal, noted a junior observer, her voice sac inflating with what might have been professional interest or profound horror, while conscious. Perhaps they possess significantly reduced pain receptors, suggested another specialist hopefully. The Earthling on screen promptly disproved this theory by releasing a colorful string of vocalizations that the EU translation matrix struggled to process but eventually rendered as creative anatomical impossibilities and references to excrement. Apparently not, Xylith said. Add to the preliminary report. Earthlings experience pain at approximately standard levels but exhibit abnormal tolerance and functionality despite it. The consortium had encountered species with elevated pain thresholds before. The crystalline Vorax could lose entire appendages without discomfort, and the gaseous nebulae had no physical forms to damage. But Earthlings were different. They felt everything, expressed their discomfort vocally, and then simply continued functioning. Most peculiar, muttered the consortium's lead xenopsychologist, who had been silently observing from the corner. They appear to incorporate humor as a psychological pain management technique. On the feed, an Earthling with a freshly bandaged head wound was laughing with companions gesturing at the crimson-soaked dressing while mimicking the explosion that had caused it. Humor about potentially fatal injuries. Xylith's appendages, twisted into the xenobiological equivalent of raised eyebrows. Are we certain they're not suffering from neural damage? It appears to be a cultural adaptation, the psychologist replied. Preliminary assessment suggests it's a bonding mechanism that simultaneously downplays threat severity and reinforces group cohesion. Fascinating and disturbing in equal measure, Xylith noted, adding another marker to the rapidly expanding Earthling medical profile. Have we determined why they haven't developed more advanced medical technology? Their spacefaring capabilities suggest they should possess considerably more sophisticated methods, yet their battlefield medicine appears remarkably primitive. The data analyst consulted her terminal. They have more advanced capabilities in their primary medical facilities. However, combat deployments seem to operate under different parameters. We're observing what they call field medicine, a deliberately simplified approach designed for emergency stabilization in resource-limited environments. You mean they choose this barbaric approach? Xylith's color shifted to deep indigo, the xenobiological equivalent of mouth-agape shock. Affirmative. And our preliminary observation suggests remarkably high survival rates despite these methods. The observation team fell silent as the feed showed an Earthling medic instructing a wounded soldier to bite down on something before removing metal fragments from their leg using what appeared to be standard mechanical pincers rather than precision. Molecular extractors. A collective ripple of anxiety passed through the assembled medical professionals. Volunteers? Xylith inquired hopefully. The room remained still. I'll note this as a designated assignment then, she sighed, her appendages drooping slightly. Several standard cycles later, a team of consortium medical observers found themselves aboard an Earthling military transport vessel heading toward D, what Earthlings casually referred to as a conflict zone. The observers wore their most advanced biohazard protection gear, not because of any identified pathogens, but because none of them trusted the Earthling approach to sterile field maintenance. "You folks are in for quite a show," said their military liaison, and weathered Earthling with numerous healed injuries visible on exposed skin. "Just stay close to our medics and try to remain out of the line of fire." "Line of fire?" asked the team's trauma specialist, her translation matrix struggling with the idiom. The Earthling displayed a disconcerting exhibition of bone that the team had been briefed about but still found alarming. Figure of speech, mostly. As the transport shuddered through atmospheric re-entry, Xylith reviewed the mission parameters on her datapad. The Consortium Council had emphasized the importance of this assessment. Earthlings had appeared seemingly from nowhere with surprisingly advanced propulsion technology and an eagerness to join interstellar society. Their physiological resilience could make them valuable allies or terrifying adversaries. "Approaching drop zone," announced the pilot. "Prepare for rapid deployment." The alien observers exchanged glances of nervous anticipation. They were medical professionals, scientists dedicated to the study and preservation of life. They had trained extensively to remain detached and objective even in challenging circumstances. None of that training had covered Earthlings. With their bizarre combination of fragility and resilience, their primitive yet effective medical solutions, or their inexplicable ability to laugh in the face of physical trauma that would incapacitate most sentient species, the transport doors opened, revealing a landscape illuminated by explosions and weapons fire. Their first direct observation of Earthling battlefield medicine was about to begin, and the Consortium's medical classification system would never be the same. The Consortium's observation team huddled behind a crumbling wall as projectiles whistled overhead. Their environmental suits, designed to withstand the vacuum of space, provided nominal protection but did absolutely nothing for their collective anxiety. "Is this standard Earthling medical procedure?" hissed Junior Observer Nexel, ducking lower, as something exploded nearby. "Practicing medicine while being actively targeted by high-velocity kinetic weapons?" Their Earthling guide, a combat medic with the improbable designation of Patch, despite lacking any Consortium-recognized medical credentials, just shrugged. The casual dismissal of imminent death was yet another perplexing Earthling trait. "Welcome to battlefield medicine," Patch said, checking his supplies. "Rule 1, you can't help anybody if you're dead. Rule 2, sometimes you got to break Rule 1. Before any of the observers could process this contradictory philosophy, an Earthling soldier slid into their position, dragging another who was leaking copious amounts of red bodily fluid from a leg wound. "Got a bleeder, Patch?" the first Earthling announced with what the Consortium's psychological analysis matrix identified as inappropriate calm. The injured Earthling, displaying none of the expected shock symptoms despite significant blood loss, looked at the alien observers and actually formed its mouthparts into a smile. "Hey, the Star Squid doctors are here. Am I going to be in a research paper?" Xylith, instinctively activating her specimen documentation protocols, replied, "Your case will certainly warrant notation in our xenobiological database." "Fantastic," said the bleeding Earthling, then inexplicably offered a thumbs-up gesture while Patch cut away the fabric surrounding the wound. What followed was a masterclass in medical improvisation that violated countless Consortium treatment protocols. Patch examined the wound, a jagged tear that had mercifully missed major vessels, and quickly cleaned it using a solution from a small bottle. "Is that a proper antiseptic compound?" asked medical observer Rimlek, hovering nervously. "Nah, just distilled spirits," Patch replied, not looking up. "Multi-purpose, disinfects wounds, sterilizes tools. and if things get really bad, gets you numb enough not to care. You sterilize medical instruments with recreational intoxicants? Xylith's voice modulator couldn't quite capture her professional horror. Only in emergencies, Patch clarified, as if this somehow made it better. Usually we use actual medical alcohol, but supply drops are running behind. The wounded soldier snorted. That's military logistics for you. Plenty of ammunition, never enough bandages. Patch removed a curved needle and thread, actual physical thread, not cellular binding gel or nanite sutures, from his kit and began closing the wound with practiced efficiency. You're using mechanical closure methods? Rimlek asked, fascination overcoming revulsion. Without anesthetic? Locals right here, Patch said, briefly holding up a small injector before returning to his work. But we're running low, so we save it for the really bad ones. This isn't bad? Nexel's voice rose an octave. The wounded earthling laughed, then winced. Nah, this is just routine. You should have seen what happened to Johnson last week. Took shrapnel to the abdomen, used his own belt to hold himself together while he dragged two unconscious comrades to the extraction point. And this Johnson survived? Xylith asked, making notes so rapidly her datapad struggled to keep up. Oh yeah, he's fine, the patient replied while Patch tied off the last stitch. Well, fine might be generous. He's got an artificial waist. Collection system now, but he'll be back in rotation next season. The observation team exchanged glances of disbelief through their transparent helmets. Your species returns to combat duty after sustaining injuries that require artificial waste. Collection? Rimlek's analytical curiosity overpowered her disgust. If they can still shoot, they can still serve, Patch said, applying what appeared to be adhesive bandaging over the stitched wound. That's the unofficial motto anyway. The wounded soldier tested his leg gingerly. How long until I can get back out there, Patch? Give it at least a couple days before you do anything foolish, Patch replied, packing up his supplies. And change the dressing twice daily. Use the antibiotic ointment. Can I get back to my unit now? You should remain immobile while cellular repair processes initiate, Xylith interjected, unable to contain her medical concern. Our protocols recommend extended complete rest for lacerations exceeding moderate size. Both Earthlings stared at her, then burst into laughter. That's adorable, Patch said. But we've got a battle to win and we're short-handed as it is. The wounded soldier was already standing, putting weight on his freshly stitched leg. Thanks for the patch job, Patch, and good luck with your research, Squid Docs. Hope we don't disappoint. With that, he limped away toward the sound of weapons fire, moving with remarkable speed for someone who had lost a significant portion of his total blood volume mere minutes ago. Should we stop him? Nexel asked, visibly distressed. His wound could reopen under physical stress. Try it, Patch challenged with a grin. But I warn you, I've seen soldiers with worse injuries physically fight medical personnel who tried to keep them from rejoining their units. Before anyone could respond, their position was rocked by another explosion, closer this time. Patch calmly checked his equipment while the consortium team flinched collectively. We should move, he said. The front lines are shifting this way. As they relocated to a field medical station, a crude structure that failed to meet even the most basic consortium standards for a medical facility, the observation team witnessed a parade of Earthling resilience that defied scientific explanation. Soldier with burns covering a significant portion of her body insisted she only needed some cream and a bandage before returning to operate heavy artillery. Another had self-administered a crude tourniquet using communication wire and the barrel of his weapon as a twisting rod, then walked a considerable distance to seek treatment. Most disturbing was the group that arrived carrying a comrade with a penetrating chest wound. While Patch worked to stabilize the patient, the others compared injuries like they were trading collectible items. Got this one from a drone strike last month, said one, displaying a puckered scar on his arm. Still got fragments they couldn't get out. That's nothing, countered another, lifting her uniform to reveal an extensive network of scar tissue across her torso. Explosive took out our transport. Woke up during surgery when the local anesthetic wore off. Patch had to hold me down to finish removing the metal bits. You were conscious during surgical debridement? Rimlek asked, her voice barely audible. Yeah, hurt tremendously, the Earthling said casually. But the medical ship was overwhelmed. They ran out of general anesthetic treating the critical cases. And you weren't considered critical? Xylith inquired, struggling to maintain scientific detachment. The Earthling shrugged. I was still conscious and my vitals were stable. That puts you pretty low on the triage list. Throughout the observation period, the consortium team documented dozens of similar cases. Earthlings who cauterized their own wounds using heated knife blades or rifle barrels. Soldiers who reset dislocated joints by slamming them against walls, or having comrades pull their limbs until the joints snapped back into place. Medics performing complex procedures with minimal equipment, using everyday items as impromptu medical tools. I've observed numerous clear violations of pain management protocols, Nexel noted during a brief lull in casualties. Not to mention their apparent disregard for infection control standards. Earthlings appear to prioritize immediate functionality over long-term recovery, Rimlek added. It's as if they've evolved medical practices based on battlefield necessity rather than optimal healing conditions. Xylith was updating their findings when Patch approached, wiping red-stained hands on his uniform. So, getting good data for your report, he asked, helping himself to a ration bar. Another violation, eating in a medical treatment area. Xylith sighed. Your species' approach to medicine is unprecedented in our database, she admitted diplomatically. Patch laughed. That's one way of putting it. Look, we know our methods seem primitive compared to what you folks probably have, but out here, you work with what you've got. A sudden commotion interrupted them as two soldiers rushed in carrying a third whose arm hung at an unnatural angle, bone clearly visible through torn flesh. Compound fracture. Took a direct hit, one of the carriers reported. He cauterized it himself with a flare to stop the bleeding, but he's starting to crash. Patch immediately moved to assess the patient, who was somehow still conscious. Did I get the attacker? The injured soldier asked, voice weak but determined. Yeah, you got him, his comrade confirmed. Dropped him right after you took the hit. The wounded Earthling smiled through pain-clenched teeth. Worth it, then. As Patch worked to stabilize the horrific injury, Xylith observed with a mixture of professional fascination and personal dread. These Earthlings didn't just endure pain. They weaponized their own resilience, turning their body's ability to function through trauma into a tactical advantage. It was simultaneously terrifying and awe-inspiring. Field amputation? Patch asked one of his Earthling assistants, assessing the mangled limb. Can you save it? The patient asked, still conscious, still engaged in his own treatment decisions. Maybe, but you'll need specialized surgery, nerve grafts, probably cybernetic assistance for full function. The injured Earthling considered this for approximately 3 seconds. Do what you can now. I'll worry about the fancy stuff later. As the consortium team watched Patch prepare for a procedure that would have required full surgical facilities and a team of specialists in their medical system, Xylith realized their report would need significant revision. Earthlings weren't just another species to classify. They were rewriting the fundamental assumptions of battlefield medicine through sheer determination and an apparently evolutionary disregard for what should be physically possible. No wonder the diplomatic corps had flagged this assessment as high priority. Any species that could continue fighting while essentially falling apart represented either the galaxy's most valuable ally or its most dangerous potential threat. Given what she'd witnessed so far, Xylith wasn't sure which classification would be more accurate. If the consortium's medical ethics committee could witness what Xylith's team experienced over the next several hours, they'd immediately recall everyone for psychological decontamination, not because of biological hazards, but because Earthling battlefield medicine was proving mimetically dangerous. The observers were beginning to find the unthinkable almost reasonable. Dawn broke over the military encampment as the alien team found themselves integrated into the Earthling medical response, not by choice, but by necessity after successive waves of casualties overwhelmed the available personnel. Pass me that clotting powder, called an Earthling medic designated Skells, with apparent ironic reference to her skeletal thinness. Nexel found himself automatically complying, passing the agent to the Earthling, who promptly poured it directly into an abdominal wound that would have mandated immediate surgery in any consortium facility. Is that advisable? He ventured, watching the powder react with blood. Is it advisable to get hit with shrapnel? No. Is it advisable to keep someone alive until proper surgery? Yes. Skells didn't look up. Medicine out here isn't about advisable. It's about survivable. Across the triage area, Xylith experienced a similar paradigm shift while assisting with damage control surgery, a procedure involving deliberately leaving a patient's abdominal cavity open, covered only with a vacuum-sealed dressing. You're not completing the surgical closure? Xylith asked, keeping her appendages steady despite professional discomfort. Nope. Damage control now, definitive repair later, explained the medic. Close him up now and he'll develop compartment syndrome. Besides, we need to get him stable enough for transport. But the infection risk is less immediate than organ failure from abdominal hypertension. We'll pump him full of antibiotics and hope for the best. Hope. The concept kept appearing in Earthling medical decisions. Hope, chance, luck, none of these had place in consortium protocols built on predictable outcomes and controlled variables. Earthlings incorporated randomness into their treatment algorithms, as if chaos were just another tool in their medical kits. An explosion rocked the medical station, sending everyone diving for cover. Through dust and debris, Xylith saw Patch drag a wounded soldier behind a barrier, assess the damage, a traumatic amputation below the knee, and apply a tourniquet while continuing a conversation about something called fantasy sports, requesting permission to administer consortium medical technology. Xylith transmitted when the crisis subsided. Their casualties exceed local treatment capabilities. The response came quickly. Request denied. Observation protocols remain in effect. Frustration rippled through her gill membranes. With a single portable regeneration unit, she could stabilize every critical patient. Instead, she was documenting their suffering with scientific detachment. Or at least, she was supposed to be, maintaining detachment. The reality was proving more complicated. Incoming. The warning came seconds before another wave of casualties flooded the station. What followed was a masterclass in Earthling triage, a brutal, efficient sorting system that prioritized those most likely to survive with immediate intervention, while setting aside both the walking wounded and the near-dead. Consortium ethics prioritized those in most critical condition, but Earthlings inverted this, focusing resources on salvageable cases. Multiple projectile wounds to the chest, collapsed lung, massive bleeding, announced a medic rushing in with a gurney. Treatment Bay 3. Prep for chest tube and blood transfusion, Skells directed without looking up. The methodical chaos continued. As the Earthling medical team processed casualties with mechanical efficiency that belied the emotional weight of their work. Only in brief moments, a hand lingering on a patient's shoulder, a muttered curse when efforts failed, did the emotional toll become visible. A commotion near the entrance drew attention. A soldier refusing treatment, attempting to leave despite a visibly broken arm. My squad is still out there, he argued. I can still shoot with my other hand. You're no good to them with a compound fracture that could sever an artery, Patch countered, physically blocking the exit. 20 minutes, let me set it, then you can go play hero again. The soldier grudgingly complied. Fine, but no pain medication, need to stay sharp. This particular brand of Earthling stubbornness manifested again when the station itself came under direct fire. Rather than evacuating, the logical response in consortium protocols, the Earthling medical team simply relocated to the most protected section and continued working. Xylith found herself assisting with an emergency thoracotomy, manually opening a chest cavity while debris fell around them, and security personnel returned fire. Is this standard procedure? She asked, passing instruments while trying to ignore the weapon's fire. What, cracking a chest? Only when you've got no other options, Patch replied. No, I meant performing surgery during active combat. Patch glanced up briefly. Compared to some situations I've worked in, this is practically a luxury resort. At least we have a roof and actual medical supplies. A pivotal moment came when a critically injured soldier arrived with an injury pattern Xylith had encountered in her previous work. A pulmonary contusion combined with systemic inflammatory response that Earthling medicine was treating as separate issues. Your treatment protocol is addressing symptoms individually, she told Skells. There's a specific anti-inflammatory pathway you could target that would address both issues simultaneously. Using only terminology available in Earthling medical science, Xylith explained the approach. Skells adapted the treatment protocol, combining medications that mimicked the consortium's more advanced therapy. The patient stabilized within minutes. Well, I'll be amazed, Skells said, checking vital signs. That shouldn't have worked that fast. The night brought more casualties, including a soldier with multiple traumatic amputations who, upon regaining consciousness, immediately asked, "When can I get back out there?" Patch, checking vital signs, didn't miss a beat. Well, standard recovery for multiple amputations is at least a year, so I'd say, knowing you, about a quarter of that before you bully your way back to limited duty. The patient smiled. Challenge accepted. I'll do it in half that time. Instead of addressing the psychological impossibility of this attitude, Patch simply nodded. I'll take that bet. Loser buys drinks when we get back to base. This exchange crystallized the fundamental difference between consortium and Earthling approaches. Consortium protocols treated the body as a system to be restored to baseline function. Earthlings treated it as a platform for accomplishing objectives, with recovery defined not by medical standards, but by the individual's ability to return to their chosen purpose. By the time evacuation transports arrived, the consortium observers had accumulated enough data to completely rewrite the medical classification parameters for Earthlings. More importantly, they recognized that Earthling battlefield medicine reflected something deeper than mere physiological resilience or technological limitations. It represented a fundamentally different relationship with pain, injury, and recovery. One that prioritized immediate functionality over optimization, incorporated psychological factors as actual treatment components, and recognized medicine, not as a perfect science but as a constantly adapting practice. As the medical station broke down operations, Patch approached Xylith. So, learned anything useful for your report? Your species approach defies conventional classification, Xylith admitted, particularly your ability to continue functioning, despite conditions that would incapacitate most species. Patch laughed. That's not unique to soldiers. You should see civilians after natural disasters. Regular people lifting collapsed concrete, performing resuscitation for hours, walking on broken bones to get help. This isn't special training. It's just human. Just human. Xylith repeated the phrase, inadequate to capture what she had witnessed. You don't simply endure damage, you incorporate it into your functional capacity. Where other species would shut down to heal, you adapt around the injury and continue operating. As the consortium team prepared to depart, Xylith wondered if the diplomatic corps truly understood what they had discovered. This wasn't just another species to catalog. It was a fundamental challenge to established assumptions about how medicine should function. And if Earthlings approached other aspects of life with the same adaptive persistence they brought to battlefield medicine, their integration into galactic society would be far more transformative than anyone had anticipated. The newly established Galactic Medical Council chambers fell silent as Xylith completed her presentation. Her official report, Observations on Earthling Battlefield Medical Practices, had just shattered every preconception the assembled xenomedical specialists held about resilience classifications. This data can't be accurate, protested the Vasine delegate, neural filaments twitching in agitation. No species could maintain combat effectiveness after such injuries. Your team must have misinterpreted their behavior. The documentation is extensive and verified, Xylith replied calmly. Earthlings don't just endure trauma, they weaponize their recovery process. They've developed medical approaches explicitly designed to return damaged individuals to functionality with minimal resources. The Council's viewing screen displayed footage that still disturbed Xylith. An Earthling soldier cauterizing his own wound with a heated blade while directing troops over a communications device. pausing only briefly to curse when the hot metal seared his flesh. "We must reconsider Earthlings' classification," urged Rimlek, who had co-authored the report. "Their medical resilience suggests they belong in an entirely new category. They're not just durable like the crystalline Vorax or regenerative like the aquatic Zenvox. Earthlings are adaptively persistent." The debate lasted for 3 full cycles, with multiple factions forming among the council members. The Security Assessment Group argued that Earthlings represented a potential threat. Any species that could continue fighting while critically injured would make formidable opponents in conflict. The Medical Exchange Initiative saw opportunity. Earthling. Battlefield techniques could revolutionize emergency response protocols throughout consortium space. Meanwhile, Earthlings had been given provisional membership in the consortium, and their medical personnel were already integrating into joint operation centers. The irony wasn't lost on Xylith when the Council received an emergency notification. An explosion at a consortium research facility had caused multiple casualties from various species. The nearest response team happened to be Earthling military, medics who had been participating in a cultural exchange program. The Council watched in real time as Earthling medical personnel treated wounded consortium citizens using the same improvised techniques Xylith had documented. The results were undeniable. Survival rates significantly higher than consortium statistical models predicted possible with available resources. "Before we vote on Earthling classification," Xylith addressed the Council, "consider this. For all their seemingly primitive methods, Earthlings have developed medical approaches that prioritize function over perfection. Where we seek to restore ideal health in controlled environments, they focus on maintaining critical capabilities under the worst possible conditions." The final classification was unanimously approved. Earthlings would be designated as adaptive medical practitioners, the only species ever to receive this designation. Several cycles later, Xylith found herself in the newly established Earthling Consortium Medical Training Center, where consortium medical personnel were learning battlefield techniques from the same Earthling medics she had observed in the field. "You know what's really funny about all this?" Patch asked as they watched a training session on improvised airway management. "Countless years of consortium medical advancement, and you're taking notes while we demonstrate how to make a chest, seal out of plastic packaging and tape." Xylith's gill membranes rippled in what Earthlings now recognized as amusement. "The greatest advances sometimes come from the most unexpected sources. Your species has taught us that perfect isn't always optimal." "Just promise me one thing," Patch said. "When you write the training manual, don't leave out the part where we curse. It's medically necessary for pain management." Xylith made a note. The consortium still had much to learn about Earthling medicine, including its peculiar psychological components. After all, any species that could laugh while cauterizing their own wounds clearly understood something about healing that transcended conventional medical science.